What's up, Royal Spartan Tribe? This is Royal Spartan 125, back for yet another great reaction. This is biggest naval battle of World War II, Part 1. The Battle of Leyte Gulf. Battle 360 history. Okay. This is a requested video, and there's two parts to it. But yeah, we'll get this one done, and then we'll move on to the other one. Okay. I will leave links in the description down below for this video and its channel. Check out my links while you're there. I have no idea what to expect from this one. I don't know if this is like an official sort of like documentary one, or if it's like somebody just made it from YouTube. I have no idea. Guess we'll find out soon. Let's jump in.
By October 1944, the American and Japanese aircraft carrier forces have been slugging it out for 3 years. And now, following the recent clash over the Philippine Sea, in which 400 planes were lost, the enemy's carrier force is a shadow of its former self.
Their carriers at this point are empty. They have vessels, but they don't have planes or pilots to put on those vessels.
Just over 100 planes remain to distribute amongst the surviving carriers. Even so, the Japanese Navy has another skilled and menacing combat arm.
The remaining strength of the Japanese Navy at this point is in its battleships and its heavy cruisers. They still have a very formidable array of heavy gun warships that they can bring to bear.
Oh, here we go.
Among the warships are Japan's 2 super battleships. The monsters Musashi and Yamato. The biggest battleships ever built.
Whoa.
They were massive battleships.
I know I've heard that before, but somehow I forgot about it. Like, the biggest battleships ever built. Not including today, like now. Or is that just like for World War II? I'm sure someone will let me know in the comment section. You always do. Okay.
They were massive battleships. 863 feet long, 172-foot beam, weighing 72,000 tons. The Yamato and the Musashi both had a main battery of 9 460-millimeter guns. That's 18.1 inches. The largest naval guns used in combat.
They're extremely heavily armored, yet relatively fast, very powerful, graceful warships. And they're able to sustain a level of punishment that was considered inconceivable even at the beginning of the war.
Japanese admirals must now rely on these large surface warships to stop the American advance.
You see the people on the deck? My God. Look at them all. That's probably only a fraction of them. Can you imagine the size of that ship, how many people are on it? Is that like all of the crew in one place? That's bad.
Japanese admirals must now rely on these large surface warships to stop the American advance through the Pacific. They believe the best way to do it is to disrupt the American beach landings.
It's recognized at this point in the war that it's important to hit the American invasion forces. So the point of attack for the Japanese battleships for the first time is not their American opposite numbers, but is rather the beachhead itself and the transports and the logistical apparatus that are supporting this invasion.
On
Could
the
you
opposite
imagine
side
being
of the
on one of
equation,
those?
the American carrier forces are holding their own, so far. They still have plenty of carriers and aircraft. U.S. admirals also have battleships and cruisers at their disposal. They feel they have enough strength at this point in the war to finally target the Philippines. Taking the Philippines will place U.S. forces between Japan and its Navy's oil supply in Indonesia.
Oh, they're trying to cut them off?
But any attempted landing in the Philippines will be hotly contested. Japanese occupiers will defend this crucial ground to the death.
Like, you take it. A lot of the Japanese ones, I mean, yeah, okay, the Allied ones knew there was a chance they wouldn't come back, but the Japanese were told to take their own lives rather than surrender, rather than lose. Right? If they thought they were going to lose, thought they were going to crash into the enemy. You know what I mean? Thought they were going to lose, crash into the enemy. You know what I mean? There was no way out for them. This was it. The Japanese, it was a matter of honor. You know what I mean? They had no choice. They could not back off. You know, their emperor was like their god.
The American strategy for taking back the Philippines calls first for the capture of the centrally located island of Leyte.
It's felt that Leyte needs to be captured so that we can put air bases into operation. And then we'll extend our air umbrella over further portions of the Philippines and go on eventually to the liberation of Luzon, which contains the capital of Manila.
Japan's battleships and cruisers will steam north toward Leyte from Singapore. The warships will split into two groups, one force sailing through the Sulu Sea and Surigao Strait and approaching Leyte Gulf from the south. The other half sailing through the Sibuyan Sea and San Bernardino Strait and coming down on Leyte from the north.
They have a southern and a northern pincer composed of battleships and cruisers that will hopefully meet up off of the island of Leyte and there crush the invasion convoys.
When Japanese and American forces collide, the numbers of ships involved and the hundreds of miles separating major battle areas will distinguish the struggle for Leyte Gulf as the largest naval battle in the history of mankind.
The largest in the history of man. Seriously? Wow. Oh. Okay, that's the end of part one. Well, I might just do part two. Hold on. Let me bring part two up. It'll just be a cut for you probably. This is part two. Just like the last one, but 6 minutes long. So, yeah.
Battle of Leyte Gulf. While William Halsey's Third Fleet has been pummeling the Japanese carriers off Cape Engano, the American landing forces in Leyte Gulf have been caught completely off guard.
I'll tell you, could you imagine being on the beachfront, you know, on one of those carriers, taking you to the beach? That must have been absolutely terrifying. You know what I mean? Knowing that you're going to this beach, bullets going to be flying from every direction, the ships are going to be firing on you. Oh, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. I tell you. Like, how many lives were lost on the beaches near the end of the war? That's just the American ones, you know what I mean? Because by then, did they win? Was the war in Europe already over by that point? And this was the Americans sort of wrapping up the Japanese? Or was this during? Wait, did it give a year? I think it gave a year, didn't it? Ah, I missed it. Didn't give a year this time though. can't remember what year it was, but if this was like 1945, you know what I mean? They're wrapping up sort of like, I don't know. You guys will let me know.
Forces in Leyte Gulf have been caught completely off guard. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force. The force Halsey thought was retreating, in fact turned around, sailed all night through the San Bernardino Strait, entered the Philippine Sea, and steamed south toward Leyte Gulf early this morning. With Halsey's Third Fleet well north sinking carriers, Kurita reached the Gulf unopposed and is now bearing down on the American landing forces.
Oh, the Japanese did it there
Seventh Fleet's
first?
battleships are too far south to lend immediate aid, and the destroyers and carriers simply don't have adequate firepower.
They are hopelessly outgunned. There's no weapon larger than a 5-inch gun on any of the American ships in the area. And on the Japanese side, you have battleship Yamato, which is armed with 18.1-inch guns, the largest naval rifles ever installed afloat. They have a second battleship. They have numerous heavy cruisers. This is a mismatch of mythic proportions.
But the commander of one of the small destroyers chooses to stand and make the best showing he can, despite the odds. Lieutenant Commander Ernest E. Evans, commanding the destroyer USS Johnston, determines to charge the enemy.
This is a
He had
tiny
two
little
choices.
ship.
He could fight or fight. But what he did is he turned his ship and he actually went and he attacked his Japanese armada.
Evans orders his little vessel to speed toward the vastly superior Japanese force. He knows the enemy's guns will be firing on him, but he plans to weave to try to avoid the killing rounds. And if he gets close enough, he might
That's
just
crazy.
score a lucky hit.
Look at that little...
Evans's
little
bold
ship.
charge inspires
Compared
other
to-
commanders around him, and soon many destroyers join the attack.
Oh.
They go after the Japanese with both gunfire and torpedoes.
The thing is, though, right? The bigger ships take longer to reload. They've got like machine guns and stuff to support them. But you know what I mean? You take these little ships flying around like mosquitoes. You know what I mean? Trying dodging the fire and stuff and firing back at them. They could do a lot of damage. You know what I mean? Especially if they're getting close. Someone tells me those big ships are long-range ships, and they're getting close. You know what I mean? They could do a lot of damage, I would say. So the chances are pretty slim, all the same. But they know that. They're bound to.
They go after the Japanese with both gunfire and torpedoes. They're laying smoke screens to try to screen the escort carriers as they're trying to dawdle their way out at 17 or 18 knots.
Finally in range, Evans unleashes a torpedo at the Japanese heavy cruiser Kumano. The torpedo courses through the sea, and minutes later,
Oh, see? Just like that.
Blew the bow right off the front of a Japanese cruiser.
soon the Japanese cruiser Suzuya stops to assist the wounded Kumano.
He fired another torpedo and he also hit and sunk that ship.
What?
Amid the heavy gunfire, torpedo attacks, and
Two
the hundreds
ships
of planes
today?
harassing them, Admiral Kurita and his commanders are bewildered.
The Japanese are thrown into confusion. They believe that they are being attacked by more powerful forces than they are. You start seeing Japanese cruisers getting knocked out. The Japanese battleships are taking damage to their topsides. It makes it very difficult for the Japanese to fight a coherent action against the Americans. They're
see?
constantly maneuvering to avoid air attacks, which in turn makes it difficult to direct the gunfire against.
See, I told you, these little ships coming in, like annoying little gnats. You know what I mean? Coming in, taking little bites here and there, and then moving away, and come back, taking another little bite. These big ships that are long-range ships are not suited for close combat. Definitely not.
Direct the gunfire against the American jeep carriers.
Like a bear under attack by a swarm of bees,
Yeah.
the Japanese center force falters.
Where they thought that they had a mismatch, and they really did in terms of raw material terms, they're unable to close with the Americans. They're increasingly harassed by American air power. And eventually, the Japanese admiral decides that he's had enough and he leaves.
They said, the hell with this. They turned around and they hightailed it out of there.
Looks like I was wrong. They could run. I thought they were not allowed to back off at any. I suppose if it's between losing the ships for no reason, if they have a chance to get away, you know what I mean? Don't want to lose the rest of their force. If they know they can't win. I suppose that makes sense, but I didn't think the Japanese would back off. Oh.
And they hightailed it out of there.
The Battle of Leyte Gulf has ended in utter disaster for the Japanese Navy. The Japanese losses at Leyte include 4 aircraft carriers, 3 battleships, 10 cruisers, 11 destroyers, and nearly 14,000 sailors and air crewmen. American losses, by contrast, are relatively light. 1 light aircraft carrier, 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers, 2 destroyer escorts, and 1,500 sailors and air crewmen.
Oh, that's actually a lot.
This really marks the final demise of the Japanese Navy, and they'll never really be able to do anything of a concerted nature to repel any further attacks by the U.S. Navy at this point. It really is the end of an era.
This is the end of the
U.S.
border?
Navy has now eclipsed the force that started a mode of warfare, carrier warfare, whose supreme potential no one had recognized before December 7th, 1941.
No one knew how carriers were supposed to operate. Pearl Harbor really was the initial battle that sort of announced the beginning of the carrier age warfare. Leyte is the battle that announces that there's only one Navy in the world that is really capable of doing that sort of warfare, and it's the U.S. Navy.
The Battle of Leyte Gulf has another preeminent distinction. It is the largest naval confrontation in the history of mankind.
Yeah, they said that. Oh, look at the gunfire. Wow. Okay. That is the end of the video. And that was really good. Thank you for requesting it. I'm sure you'll give me more. Yep. I enjoyed it. You know what? I'm gonna tell you. I've been putting it off for a little while because I don't know if I would enjoy it as much as I did. But I'm glad I did it today. I really am. So yeah, thank you. That was really good. I'm not a World War II kind of guy, and that's it's not really an era that I'm interested in. I like more like history from like the 1800s, that sort of thing. 1800s back, you know what I mean? Anything like 1800s before that, I'm really into. But the 20th century doesn't really interest me. You know what I mean? But I have to admit, I really did like that one. Okay. Until next time, I am out of here.